Hi everyone and welcome back to English for You. I'm Pat.
And I'm Elsie.
And today we're on day 3, the end of our story, Still Alice. So we've met Alice and her husband John. They're respected professors, but things start going wrong for Alice.
Right, Alice starts having problems remembering things.
Yeah, she travels to give a speech at Stanford University. She feels comfortable and confident about it. However, during the address, she forgets a word.
And this isn't normal. She also forgets her phone in the restaurant.
Yeah, she sees a specialist who tells her she has Alzheimer's disease. And it's genetic, so her kids could have it too. One daughter, Anna, may get it when she's older, and her other daughter, Lydia, just doesn't want to know.
Right, and Alice can't do her job anymore because of her memory loss. She forms a group for Alzheimer's patients. This helps her feel understood.
However, she's not busy now, and this is a struggle for her. What is she going to do with her life? So today we're going to see how this story wraps up. Let's read through day 3.
Reading.
Still Alice. Alice's Alzheimer's gets worse, and John can't bear seeing her forget him. One day, he tells her he wants to accept a job in New York City, which is over 300 kilometers away. Alice tries to persuade him not to, but he is determined, and she eventually gives up. Before he leaves, John takes her to the family beach house for a final vacation. The trip is difficult. At one point, Alice forgets that she has gone traveling and panics because she doesn't recognize her surroundings. Later, John shows her a book they wrote together. When she sees his name, her mind becomes clear briefly, and she tells John she remembers him. "You were the smartest person I ever knew," he replies. The following month, John leaves for New York. Anna and Lydia visit and care for Alice every day. One afternoon, Lydia acts out a play for Alice, who is moved to tears. "Do you know what it's about, Mom?" Lydia asks. "Love," says Alice. "It's about love."
So the article begins and says Alice's Alzheimer's gets worse and John can't bear seeing her forget him. I never really talked to my granddad about this, but yeah, there would have been situations where my grandma couldn't talk. She didn't know who she was, where she was, who the people around her was.
Right.
It must have been extremely difficult for him, but to be fair, he never really complained about it. So he was perhaps doing a little better than John was.
Or maybe he just kept it inside. Okay, so Alice 的阿兹海默症越来越严重。John 她的老公没有办法忍受看着 Alice 忘记她。那 bear 这边呢，它是当动词来使用哦，代表承受、忍受。那句型是 somebody can't bear doing something 或者是 to do something， 代表某人没有办法承受某事。那接下来呢，课文说 One day he tells her he wants to accept a job in New York City, which is over 300 kilometers away.
Yeah, they live up in Massachusetts somewhere, so it's away to New York. They are both in the Northeast, but America's huge, so it's 300 kilometers. A kilometer is, of course, 1,000 meters. We can say kilometer. Some people will say kilometer. They're both fine. For example, we could say, it is 5 kilometers from my school to my home, so I never walk there.
Kilometer 或者是 kilometer 两种发音都可以，那代表的是公里。那你把前面的 K-I-L-O 拿掉，你会看到 meter， 那就是公尺。那不过呢，在美国他们用到的距离单位会用的是 mile， M-I-L-E， 也就是英里。那如果是英尺呢，单数是 1 foot， 复数是 feet。那课文说啊，有一天 John 告诉 Alice 他想接受一份在纽约市的新工作，但是啊，纽约市距离他们的家是300公里的路程。
So this is obviously very sad for Alice, and we see Alice tries to persuade him not to, so not to take the job. And this is an interesting contrast from day one when it said they often spend time apart. And now she's saying, no, I want you to stay with me. So we can see how the Alzheimer's has changed her personality, her whole life. She persuades him or tries to persuade him not to take the job. To persuade means to use starting with reason and logic and then maybe some emotional pressure to get someone to do something, not do something, change their mind, and so on. You kind of go, oh, go on, please do that. If you do this, then I'll do this for you, all those kinds of things. For example, Helen didn't really want to go to the party, but her friends persuaded her to come.
Persuade 这个动词呢，代表劝服或是说服。Persuade somebody to do something， 那就是说服某人做某事。那如果要说服某人不要去做某件事，我们就把 not 加进去就可以了，那就会是 persuade somebody not to do something。那例句给同学们的是 Helen 的朋友 persuaded her to come， 代表是说服她来参加派对。那课文里面说到的是呢 Alice 试着说服她不要去。
So Alice tries to persuade John not to go, but we see in the article that he is determined, and she eventually gives up. If you are determined, you are mentally set to do something. You're not prepared to let anything stop you. You're like, this is my goal. I'm gonna get it no matter what happens. For example, Gary is determined to become a basketball player. It's his dream to play in the NBA.
Determined 这个形容词呢，代表坚决的、下定决心的。所以当你看到主词、be 动词加进来之后，接上 determined to do something， 那就是那个人下定决心做某事。所以呢，我们刚刚例句给的是 Gary， 他下定决心要变成一位篮球员。
Okay,
那 John 这里呢，他已经下定决心了，所以 Alice 最后也放弃说服他了。She gives up.
Yeah, she gives up eventually. Eventually means in the end, but also implies that some time has passed. She didn't give up straight away, but that was the final result.
Eventually 这个副词代表最终、终于，也就是经历一段时间之后，最后终于发生的事情。
Okay, so the article then says, before he leaves, before he goes off to get this new job, John takes her to the family beach house for a final vacation. So they obviously have a house on a beach somewhere. They're wealthy. They can afford this extra house. They go there for one last trip.
所以在 John 离开要到纽约工作之前他就带 Alice 到他们家的海滩度假屋去度假。But the trip is difficult.
Yeah, as it would be. It's not the kind of fun vacation they were maybe hoping for. The article says, at one point, Alice forgets that she has gone traveling and panics because she doesn't recognize her surroundings. This is definitely something I remember my grandmother doing when she was actually in the earlier stages of Alzheimer's. And this happens at one point. At one point as a phrase means at a unspecified time. We don't know exactly when. We don't know if it's at the start or the middle or the end of this trip, just at one particular time.
At one point 那就是一度。所以呢，课文说到一度Alice 还忘记她是去度假旅行 and she panics.
Right. What does it mean to panic? Let's find out. So to panic means to get suddenly very nervous and very scared and you don't know what to do. You're like, oh my goodness, do I run? Do I stay here? I don't know how to react. For example, everyone in the restaurant panicked when a fire broke out in the kitchen. Nobody was in control. Nobody said, I'll put out the fire. Just everybody started running in every direction, which of course makes things worse. So the idea of panicking is that you lose control.
没错 ，panic 这个动词呢，代表感到恐慌、惊慌失措的。那它的过去式跟过去分词呢，你必须要重复字尾 k 再加上 ed。那我们说到Alice 她一度很慌张，因为 she doesn't recognize her surroundings.
That's right. Surroundings is a noun, and we always use it in the plural form. It's always surroundings. And it just means the things all around you, the place where you are, the things you can see, all of that stuff.
没错 ，surroundings 复数哦，代表的是周围环境或是周围事物。那如果是动词围绕的话，我们用 surround 这个动词，像是 The boy panicked because he was surrounded by 3 tall guys， 代表男孩惊慌失措，因为他被3个很高的男人包围。那这边呢，课文里面讲到 Alice 认不得周围环境，所以她惊慌失措。
Okay, here's another part of this vacation. The article says, later, John shows her a book they wrote together, both college professors and so on. And so remember this, remember doing this?
那之后呢 John 就给他看一本他们一起写的书，然后课文说到 When she sees his name, her mind becomes clear briefly, and she tells John she remembers him.
Okay, so obviously this whole thing, the book, the work she did, there's a lot of memories there, and they kind of are still in her brain. They're not completely gone, and so it helps her remember John. Oh, you're this person, you're my husband, we did this together. Unfortunately, it only happens briefly. Briefly means for a short time. It starts and it stops and it's all quite quick. For example, it rained briefly this afternoon, but the weather was mostly fine.
Briefly 这个副词呢，代表短暂地，所以呢，例句给的是 rained briefly， 那就是短暂的下雨。那课文里面说到 her mind becomes clear briefly， 也就是说她看到书上 John 的名字 ，Alice 的记忆短暂变得清楚。她告诉 John， 她记得他。
Yeah, it doesn't kind of like fix it, but she does have a moment or two where she does remember. And we see in the article, you were the smartest person I ever knew, he replies. So this is John's reply, and a reply is an answer to someone's question or statement. It can be a noun. This is my reply. I sent an email, I got a reply. I asked Elsie a question, and she replied. Here's another example. The teacher asked her students questions, and they took turns replying with the answers.
Reply 这个动词呢，代表回答、回复。那如果是 ing 的形式，直接在字尾加 ing 就好了。如果是过去式或过去分词，记得去 y 加 ied。那 John 就回答咯，你以前是我认识最聪明的人了。
Okay, so time moves on, and the article says, the following month, John leaves for New York.
那隔月 John 就出发去纽约工作了。And the article says, Anna and Lydia visit and care for Alice every day.
Yep, so that's her 2 daughters. They come over, make sure she can do things by herself,
Right.
get her food, maybe they need to help her wash after a time, because that's what caring for is. It's to look after someone who can't really do it for themselves. They're too young, they're too old, they're too sick, something like that.
Care for somebody 那就照顾某人，也可以说是 look after somebody or take care of somebody 也是可以的。那 Anna 跟 Lydia 每天都会过去照顾妈妈。
Okay, so this is where we kind of get another bit of that earlier story and bring it back. We see one afternoon, Lydia acts out a play for Alice, who is moved to tears. So to act out is something you do when you have a part of a play or a movie or TV show or something. You perform this scene or perform several scenes, but you do it as if you were on stage. You're not just sitting down reading the lines, even reading them in a dramatic way. You're standing up, you're moving, you're pretending like this is the real show. So this is what Lydia is doing. Remember, she wanted to be an actress. That was her dream. She's now acting out a play for her mom.
To act something out 代表是将点点点表演出来，所以有一天下午呢 ，Lydia 演了一出剧给 Alice 看，然后呢，我们看到了一个补数用法，逗点后面接 who is moved to tears.
Yeah, if you are moved to tears, then that means you feel so much emotion that it makes you cry. You might say the end of a movie, part of a book, something that happens, it affects you so much, either in a happy way or a sad way, that you cry.
Move somebody to tears 代表就是使某人哭了出来。那不过呢，在课文里面我们用的是被动，代表 Alice 被感动到哭了出来。
Okay, so then we're carrying on from this particular scene, and the article starts with a quote and says, Do you know what it's about, Mom? Lydia asks.
你知道这是关于什么吗 ？Lydia 这样子问妈妈。那最后我们说到，妈妈的回答是 Love, says Alice. It's about love. 这是关于爱。
Yep, so she does understand enough of what's going on. She understands what Lydia is doing and all that stuff to go, this is a story about love. And that's, of course, one of the main ideas, love between these people, these family members, and how they're doing that stuff. It also shows that maybe Lydia was right to want to be an actress. She's obviously good enough. She can make her mum, even if she can't remember the words, to feel love. This story is a love story. I recognize the emotion. I understand what's going on. It is a love story. So that's where the story ends. So we know that there is still Alice in there. There's still a part of her, despite the Alzheimer's, that is still in her brain. That's where we're going to leave it and go to today's For You Chat question.
For You Chat.
So today's question is, what problems do you think friends or family of Alzheimer's patients face? I guess this isn't a question of think. This is a question of know.
So I think the biggest problem is they won't be able to know how to help the patients at first.
Yeah, you kind of go, I'm not really sure what I need to do here. How can I make sure they're okay? Eventually, it gets to the point when, okay, it's like they're a baby and I'm taking care of them.
Right.
But before that, when they're still able to do a lot of things for themselves, but just keep forgetting things or panicking, that's often a more difficult part than what happens later.
Right, and they have to learn how to accept the truth first.
Yeah, the friends or family or the people, the sufferers?
I think the family.
Okay.
Yeah.
I found one of the things was, for the final maybe 5 years of my grandmother's life, she just wasn't actually my grandmother. She was kind of I don't want to say it like not in a bad way, but she was just a thing, almost like a problem. Like what made her my grandma had gone a long time ago. So for us, it was just, and again, this is going to sound really bad, but we kind of were hoping that she would die sooner than she did because she had no quality of life. She couldn't do anything. It was hard for her, for my grandfather, for everybody else. It would have been better for her, I think, and everybody if she'd gone a bit earlier. And weirdly, she didn't go until my granddad passed away first.
Oh.
And it was only maybe a month or two after. So we think that somehow, even though she couldn't speak, do anything, she could barely eat, she somehow recognized that her husband had gone and wasn't coming to see her anymore. And that's what made her finally go.
Okay.
So in some way, deep inside, there was still a part of my grandmother.
Of course.
Even though we'd kind of basically thought the real person she was isn't there.
Wow.
So yeah, it's I wouldn't wish this on anybody. It's a very tough thing to have to handle. But it is something that is part of life. And as I said, it's kind of a sad story, this one, because of those sorts of things. And I'm afraid that's how we're going to leave you. So for English for You, I'm Pat.
I'm Elsie.
And we'll talk to you again soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Vocabulary Review.
Kilometer. Kilometer. The movie theater isn't far away. It's just 1 kilometer down this road. Persuade. Ryan persuaded his mom to buy him an ice cream, even though he's not usually allowed one. Determined. Jenny is determined to pass this exam, so she is studying very hard. Panic. Ian panicked because he thought he had left his wallet on the bus, but then he found it. Briefly. Marcus was only briefly interested in sports as a child. He soon realized he prefers art. Reply. Dan still hasn't replied to my message. I sent it 2 days ago.
字汇小补帖
Eventually. Surroundings.
以上节目是由活用空中美语制作。活用空中美语杂志，请洽询全国各大书店。如欲索取试听教材，请来电02-2364-4000 02-2364-4000，或上网查询，网址是 www.english4u.net www.english4u.net